40 minutes after she took the first bite, she clutched her stomach and started gasping for air. Her eyes went wide and panic spread across the table. But I didn't move. I just watched, because that salad was never meant for her. You see, this didn't start today. It started the day I married into a family that smiled to my face and stabbed behind my back. But before I tell you what happened to her, you need to know what led me here. When I married Daniel, I thought I had finally found peace. He was gentle, quiet, thoughtful in ways that felt rare. And for someone like me, soft-spoken, never the loudest in the room, his quiet love felt like safety. At least, that's what I believed. Until I met his family. From the first dinner at his childhood home, I felt it. That strange, tight-lipped tension that sits in the air but no one talks about. His mother, Lorraine, greeted me with a smile so wide it felt rehearsed. "You're even prettier in person," she said, touching my cheek. "Daniel usually goes for simpler girls." I laughed politely, unsure if it was a compliment or a warning. Later, I realized everything she said came wrapped in lace, but stitched with needles. Lorraine ran her home like a 5-star hotel. Immaculate, elegant, but suffocating. Every cushion fluffed just right. Every wine poured with intent. Every word? Calculated. She never raised her voice, but she didn't need to. Her real power was in the silence that followed her sentences. "You look lovely, darling. Though next time, maybe wear something less clingy. We're traditional here." "Oh no, don't worry. I'll redo the table setting. You've probably never hosted formal dinners before." She made me feel like a guest in my own marriage. Then there was Ava, Daniel's younger sister. Blonde, polished, always perfectly posed for Instagram. The kind of woman who turned every gathering into a stage performance. And I was the uninvited understudy. "Oh my God, that's the dress you picked for the wedding photos? Brave. You still don't know how to make vinaigrette from scratch? It's like the easiest thing ever. Daniel used to date this girl from Paris, super refined. But you're sweet too." Everything was a comparison, and I always lost. What hurt most wasn't their cruelty. It was Daniel's silence. At first, I made excuses for him. He's stuck in the middle. He doesn't want to upset them. But the truth revealed itself in subtle ways. At dinners, he'd laugh along when Ava mocked my cooking. When Lorraine corrected my table manners like I was a child, he'd smile apologetically, but never say a word. And when I finally confronted him after a particularly harsh night, he just said, "They don't mean it, babe. That's just how my family is. Don't take everything so seriously." I realized then, I was alone, and that loneliness grew louder with every microaggression. Like when Lorraine bought me perfume for my birthday and said, "It's a light, clean scent. I thought you might need something fresher." Or when Ava accidentally posted an unflattering picture of me from a family brunch with the caption, "Brunch with beauty and brains," and some background extras. And yet, I smiled. I swallowed it, all of it, because I was raised to keep the peace, to endure, to be the bigger person. But inside me, something was breaking. It's strange how emotional wounds don't bleed. They just sit there, rotting slowly, until one day you wake up and realize you're angry. Not sad, not hurt. Angry. And it was during one of those silent moments, watching them all laugh at another one of Ava's jokes at my expense, that I realized something. I was being tested, not welcomed, not loved, just tolerated, watched, poked, prodded, like they were waiting to see how much I could take before I broke. And I knew, if I kept letting them, they would never stop. That's when I started paying attention, not just emotionally, but strategically. I watched Lorraine's routines, what she cooked, what she bought. I noticed how she always insisted on preparing my meals herself, how she never ate from the same plate. How once, after eating her herbal remedy tea, I vomited for hours. And when I mentioned it to Daniel, "You probably just had a bug. Mom's obsessed with organic health stuff. Don't be paranoid." Paranoid. It stuck with me. Was I paranoid? Or finally waking up? I didn't know for sure then. But I knew this. The next time Lorraine tried to feed me something special, I wouldn't eat it, and I wouldn't throw it away either. Because sometimes when someone hands you poison with a smile, the only way to survive is to pass the plate back. It was Ava's birthday dinner. Lorraine had gone all out. White candles, silverware polished like mirrors, and her signature smug smile sharpened for the occasion. The kind of dinner where every bite is judged and every glance has meaning. I was used to this, the performances, the pressure. But this night, something felt different. "You must be exhausted, Lorraine," I said, watching her flutter between the kitchen and dining room like a queen preparing a sacrifice. She looked at me and smiled sweetly. "Actually, I made something just for you. A little something I picked up from a French chef I met in Bordeaux." She placed a bowl in front of me, crystal clear, garnished with edible flowers, pomegranate seeds, and thin slices of pear, a work of art. "It's a detox salad," she added, almost proudly. "Full of antioxidants, just what you need." There it was again, insults dressed as kindness. But I smiled and nodded. How thoughtful. Everyone else had the usual Caesar or garden mix, but mine was special. As I picked up my fork, a faint but unmistakable scent wafted upward, sour, almost metallic, masked under citrus and herbs. It was subtle. Too subtle. The kind of thing most people wouldn't notice. But I did, because I'd smelled it before. My mind snapped back to a night 3 months earlier. I'd come home from a stressful day at work, and Lorraine had greeted me with a hot cup of herbal tea. "It's a natural remedy," she said, "for stress and bloating." An hour later, I was curled on the bathroom floor, sweating, shaking, and vomiting. Daniel called it food poisoning. I wasn't so sure. I never forgot the bitterness of that tea, or the way Lorraine watched me drink it. Now, staring down at that salad, my stomach turned. But not from fear, from clarity. This wasn't a gift, it was a test. Across the table, Ava was laughing about some fashion disaster her friend had. She caught me looking at my bowl. "Wow, Mom made that for you? Must be nice," she smirked. "She's never made me anything that fancy." Lorraine didn't respond, just sipped her wine and kept watching. That's when I knew. She was waiting for me to take the first bite. So I smiled, picked up my fork, and slowly lifted a piece of lettuce to my mouth. I didn't eat it. Not really. I chewed, I smiled, I made a show of it, but I never swallowed. I reached for my napkin, dabbed my lips, then looked down at Ava's plate, nearly untouched. "You're not eating?" I asked casually. "I'm on a low-carb thing," she rolled her eyes. "These dressings are like full of sugar." Perfect. In the chaos of conversation, with Lorraine distracted by the wine refills and Daniel laughing at some tired joke from his uncle, I leaned in, swapped our plates, and repositioned her silverware with surgical precision. No one noticed, or so I thought. For the next 20 minutes, I barely breathed. Ava eventually gave in to her appetite and began picking at the salad. One bite, then another. Lorraine, across the table, had resumed her pleasant act, asking Daniel about work, complimenting the floral arrangement she had picked out, just for Ava. But every so often, her eyes would flick back to me, watching, measuring. I met her gaze once, just once, and smiled. She smiled back. But something in her expression had shifted, and I wondered, was this always part of her plan? Or did she already know I had switched the plates? My hands trembled beneath the tablecloth. Not from guilt, from adrenaline. Because if something did happen, if Ava started reacting, if anything went wrong, I wouldn't be able to take it back. The room was still laughing, talking, toasting. But inside me, the world had gone silent. Tick, tick, tick. 40 minutes, that's what they say it takes. For certain natural toxins to take effect, for stomachs to cramp, for the body to begin resisting what it doesn't recognize. Was I paranoid? Maybe. But I'd been fed too many lies, too many half-truths, too many detoxes and cleanses to trust what was on my plate anymore. So this time, I passed the test back. And what came next would change everything. The minutes dragged on like hours, 40 minutes. Time had suddenly taken on a weight I'd never known before. Ava was still sitting at the table, her fork resting uneaten on the edge of her plate. At first, she laughed and joked with the others, her usual dazzling smile lighting up the room. But slowly, very slowly, I noticed her face change. The color drained from her cheeks. Her eyes blinked rapidly, like she was trying to clear a fog. A sheen of sweat appeared on her forehead. She shifted in her chair, hands clenching the edge of the table as if holding herself together. I watched in silence. The rest of the family, however, remained oblivious for a few more seconds. Then the panic began. "Ava?" Daniel's voice cracked as he reached for her. She gasped, her breathing shallow and uneven. I don't feel well," she whispered. Lorraine was the first to respond, her face a mask of concern, the perfect act of a caring mother. "Oh, darling, it must be the salad. It's quite rich. Maybe something in it disagreed with you," she said smoothly, placing a hand on Ava's trembling shoulder. Her eyes flicked quickly toward me, and for a moment, a flash of something I couldn't read passed between us. But then, she masked it with a sympathetic smile. Daniel stood up abruptly, looking between Ava and me. "Should we call a doctor?" No, Lorraine interjected quickly. "It's probably just indigestion. Let her rest a moment." The room grew heavy. Everyone was watching Ava now, whispering quietly. I held my breath. Not because I was afraid of what was happening to her, but afraid of what it meant for all of us. Had I really crossed a line? Was this what I'd feared? As Ava leaned forward, her face pale and glistening with sweat, I caught sight of her eyes, wild, confused, vulnerable. She looked so small, so human. And for the first time that night, I felt a flicker of doubt. Was this really the way? But there was no turning back, because Lorraine was watching me now, her eyes sharp, calculating, like a predator that knows its prey is vulnerable. I met her gaze steadily, the mask of calm carefully in place. Inside, my heart pounded like a drum. Every second stretched endlessly. The others were beginning to murmur. Someone suggested water. Daniel poured it, hands trembling. Ava took small sips, then suddenly doubled over, clutching her stomach. "Call an ambulance," someone shouted. Lorraine stood stiffly, her face pale, but her voice calm and controlled. "No need to overreact," she said firmly. "Sometimes these things pass quickly." I caught Daniel's eyes. They were filled with confusion and fear. His loyalty had always been to his family first, but now the house of cards was shaking, and I could see the cracks in his certainty. Ava's breathing became shallow again. The tension was suffocating. Then, as Ava rested her head against the table, I whispered to myself, "This is what happens when poison is served with a smile." But was it poison? Was it really? The doubt crept in like a shadow. What if this was all a terrible coincidence? What if I'd become the villain in my own story? I pushed the thought away, because Lorraine was watching me, and I could see it in her eyes. She knew what I had done, or maybe suspected. The game had changed. No more pretending. No more hiding. 40 minutes later, the truth was on the table, and nobody could look away. After the chaos settled, after Ava's pale face had been tended to and the rest of the family tried to pretend nothing had happened, I found myself alone with Lorraine. The house had grown quieter, the clinking of cutlery replaced by a tense silence that filled every corner. I knew I had to say something, to face her, to understand how far this had gone. I looked at her carefully, searching for any flicker of remorse or denial. Instead, what I saw was something colder, sharper, more dangerous. I took a breath. "You said you learned that salad recipe from a chef," I began quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. "Was it the same chef who told you how to induce food poisoning slowly, over time?" Her eyes didn't blink. A small, almost imperceptible smile curved at the corner of her lips. "You're smarter than I thought," she said, her tone smooth, but with a warning beneath every word. Not many notice the little things, the slow poison, the gradual weakening. I wanted to recoil, to scream, to run, but I stayed, because I had to hear it. "Why?" I asked, voice trembling just slightly. "Why would you do that to me? To Ava? To this family?" She looked at me like I was a puzzle she'd grown bored of solving. "Families are complicated," she said softly. "Sometimes you have to protect what matters most. Sometimes survival means making difficult choices." I clenched my fists. "So you thought poisoning me was a difficult choice?" She laughed then. Not a warm laugh. More like the sound of a blade scraping stone. "I never poisoned you," she said coldly. "That was all you, switching plates, playing games." Her gaze sharpened. "But next time, don't switch the plates." The words hung in the air, heavy and threatening. It was a warning, a promise. I realized then that Lorraine wasn't just the passive villain I'd imagined. She was something else entirely. Calculated, dangerous, and always one step ahead. I wanted to hate her, to expose her. But in that moment, I understood the real battle had just begun. Because this wasn't just about salads. It was about power, control, and who would survive when the masks came off. Ava eventually recovered. The nausea faded, the sweating stopped, and she returned to her usual confident, radiant self. But something had changed. She was quieter now, careful, paranoid even. She'd glance at her food suspiciously, ask about ingredients, and avoid Lorraine's cooking whenever she could. It was clear. The poison had left more than just a physical mark. It had cracked the perfect family facade. But for me, the wounds ran deeper, because Daniel still refused to believe me. "You're imagining things," he said more than once. "Mom wouldn't do that. You're twisting this in your head." His words cut sharper than any insult. I was trapped in a house where no one stood with me, where truth was twisted to protect the powerful. But I wasn't powerless. Because in the days that followed, I started searching. Not just for answers, but for proof. And that's when I found it. Hidden away in Lorraine's study, tucked behind a stack of cookbooks, was a small journal. The pages were filled with notes, not recipes, but detailed observations. How certain herbs caused subtle but lasting effects. Which foods could be laced to weaken someone slowly. Notes about testing limits and maintaining control. Receipts for obscure ingredients, ones that no ordinary salad needed. It was chilling. I read every line, every note. The evidence was undeniable. Lorraine was a poisoner, not just in food, but in the way she controlled her family. Daniel still wouldn't listen, but I was done waiting, done hiding, done pretending this was a family I belonged to. I began planning my next move, not with poison, but with truth. I would expose everything, the manipulation, the lies, the betrayals. I would take back my power, divorce Daniel, take everything he thought was untouchable, and I would do it with proof in my hands. Because sometimes the sharpest revenge isn't in the poison you serve, it's in the truth you reveal. And this story is far from over. If you've ever felt trapped, betrayed, or underestimated, remember, you are stronger than you think. And sometimes, the best revenge is to rise. Thank you for watching this story unfold. If you want to hear more emotional stories about betrayal, revenge, and resilience, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Like this video if you felt the tension, and share it with someone who loves a good story. Your support means the world, and every comment helps me bring more stories like this to life. Stay strong, stay wise, and until next time, remember, the truth always finds a way.